watch TV. I'm moving my legs. I'm moving my. Work out without even thinking about a call. We're going to try to three-step down.
This is Chairman Mike McCoo calling the Town of Wellington Board of Finance special meeting Thursday, March 11th, 2021 to order at 7:05 p.m. First order of business is the seating of alternates. Jeffrey Prusak is unable to attend tonight, and he asked that Brenda be seated in his absence. So I'd like a motion to seat Brenda for Jeff.
So moved.
Can I get a second? Christina, thank you. All right, Marissa, you want to call the vote?
Christina.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Pete. Pete.
Trouble unmuting. Yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure if I didn't say it loudly enough. Mike.
Yes.
I'm missing somebody.
Stephanie.
Stephanie, sorry.
Yes, and you just sound a little muted, Marissa.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to fix that.
That's better.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, motion passes. Brenda, welcome aboard. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, next order of business, approval of minutes. We have the minutes of March 4th, 2021. Marissa, thank you as always for lengthy and detailed minutes. I'm a big believer in it. While they're not necessarily required to be that detailed, I think if someone wants to look back at what we've done, this is a good way to be able to see what we've done. So good job with the 10 pages of minutes. And I have no additions or corrections. Board.
And I'll move to accept.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All right, call a vote, please.
Stephanie.
Yes.
Matt.
Abstain.
Brenda.
Yes.
Pete.
Yes.
Christina.
I'm going to abstain because I missed most of the meeting.
And Mike.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, next order of business is present to speak. Public participation is desired and encouraged. Speakers will be limited to time and appropriateness of comments to maintain progress, stay on topic, and maintain decorum. Has their video camera on and they would like to speak, please wave your hand. I'll recognize you. Erica?
Hi, Mike, thanks so much. I just wanted to give you a heads up on what I know about money coming from the American Rescue Plan. So the American Rescue Plan was signed today, and it includes money for towns and cities. There will also be funding for schools, but that will come separate from the towns and directly through CSDE. So I'm sure Phil will report on that to his board. It looks right now like it's going to come in 2 tranches, one within the next 90 days and the second about a year from now. So Treasury will have 60 days to turn the money over to the state, who then has 30 days to forward it on to towns. We don't have exact numbers yet or clearly defined acceptable uses. There are 4 pretty broad acceptable uses. And those are going to come from Treasury. So once we know those, we'll know how much we have and what we can spend it on. I do know that lost revenue can be included in this particular rescue funding. So that is a plus for, I think Lori last week reported where we were down revenue in many areas. So we should be able to offset that. It cannot be used for deposit into any pension accounts, and it cannot be used to directly or indirectly provide tax cuts. So, and that the funds can be used right now through calendar year 2024. So as we know more, we'll let you know and work on that. I do have at least one item when we get to discussion about the budget, I think could be paid for out of these dollars specifically. But I'm without clear direction, I'm hesitant to take anything out of the budget.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else in video who would like to speak, please wave your hand. I'll recognize you. Okay, anyone who is not in video, if you would like to unmute yourself and call out your name, I'll try to recognize people as they come. Okay, I'm not hearing anyone speaking up. Okay, moving on to our one agenda item for tonight, and that is budget discussion. To get us started, I did send a question into Erica. I don't know, are you ready to speak on that right now?
Sure, absolutely. The question was regarding the dollars in CIP for AV equipment for recording town meetings. So we have currently to date spent $15,614.12. That included a 65-inch interactive flat panel, so essentially a smart board. It also has a computer, video conference rack. It is portable. It's got a camera, a pan and zoom camera that sits on top, and a microphone. The microphone is meant to be a placeholder until we can get the remainder of equipment. So we've estimated those dollars at $33,000. So again, the first part we used with CRF funds. And because we were limited in the amount of funding left in that fund at the end of the fiscal year, we got what we thought was the most essential to be able to utilize it right away. So part 2 builds off of the initial, and it will include 10 individual gooseneck microphones with COVID. Sharing mics was not something we thought moving forward is something you want to get away from. It'll include a public, one mic that will be used for the public to be used on a stand. It will include 4 ceiling mounted speakers, 2 surface mounted speakers, and an amplifier. All of this is for the upstairs meeting room, so that we be allowed more space for individuals. They'll also include assisted listening systems to be in compliance with ADA codes, and there'll be 4 sets of those for use. It is possible that the cost may come in higher. As with many things in many industries, we're seeing price hikes in items. And so they're starting to see spikes in some of these things. I think this particular item was derived out of COVID and a necessity to provide our meetings to the public in a different forum. I think this is right for using those relief funds for, rescue funds for. And currently it is in the CIP plan and off budget funds in low sub dollars.
Okay, and just for clarity, the 15,000 you've spent in the current fiscal year came from rescue funds also, so there's
Correct.
no net effect on taxation in the current
No.
budget. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Board questions on that before we move on? Okay. I had a couple other questions came in last second here for you, Erica, while you're on here. The building official hours that are in the budget, there's about $1,000 for building official hours.
Okay.
I know that we contract that from the town of Bolton.
Yes.
So Mr. Rupert is actually an employee of the town of Bolton, and we're purchasing services.
Correct.
Do you have an idea of roughly how many hours that is for the year?
Yes. So this year, the last year has been very different. We've seen him very little in our building. He comes in as needed and has been doing most things remote. And so on a typical year, he is here Wednesdays. We're open from 9, so he's here from about 9 to 2. So those 5 hours on Wednesdays, and then from 3 to 7:30 on Mondays in a typical year. So But
Nine
the
and a half hours a week of office hours plus inspection time.
plus inspection time, plus the, once we began using the viewpoint, it gave us the ability to have access to him on a greater, on a broader scale. So while he's in Bolton, he's able to do some work on behalf of Willington because he has access to the system and vice versa. So there have been times he's been here and has given some time to some Bolton items if he's not working on something here. And when he's there, he can address things because of that system. There's no more need to be in office to have access to paperwork. So he is accessible to us more than just the hours he's here in the office.
Okay, so so back to my question, how that 30-some thousand dollars, how many hours is that you're planning on him working for Willington?
Well, so he's here 8 hours a week. He's here 416 hours in the year. And then it's as needed after that. And we haven't ever,
Okay.
we have yet to come across a time where he has not been available.
Yeah, I'm
he
not
takes up
questioning.
appointments.
I'm not questioning that. I'm just trying to figure
Sure.
out what we're buying. How many hours or what, how many dollars per hour is it? There must be a contract with Bolton that says you pay $75 an hour or whatever.
Let me look at the contract. I don't have that in front of me.
Okay, we can.
Donna, do you have access to that? You're muted.
I can look it up.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, we can come back to it. I just want to get a rough idea of what it is. And that was the only other question I had for in the selectmen. Okay, thank you. Other board members, question, discussion, topics?
Yeah, Mike, I have a
Yes.
question for Mr. Stevens. We received the MBR list that you sent us. I need some help translating it if you don't mind. As I see it, there's only up through 1920, even though we're currently in the 2021 year, looking at the 21-22 budget. So they're at least 2 years behind where we're trying to be. Is that correct?
Yes, you are. You're correct. So the current year that we're in, the last year they have it for is the prior year. And so this is one of the complaints that towns have is that it's not very helpful. The data is old at this point. So it's the most current data they have.
2 years is kind of old. And as I read this, in the 1920 year, we were in excess of our MBR by $847,000.
I thought the number was like 279 or something like that. I don't have that with me.
Well, it looks like we were in excess by 387 on Region 19 and over by 847 for K8. Is that, am I reading the numbers wrong, or the fact that they printed this out in 3-point type isn't helping me either.
I'm going back to look at the email myself. Just to see.
I was looking at lines 16 and 17.
Wordage. Item 8 minus item 15. Yeah, whatever that means. Yeah, I mean, Pete, I see how they're doing the math. I don't know how they factor that, if that's what that means or not.
Okay, but you see my confusion if that I look at this and that's kind of what it says to me, but I that's why I'm asking the question. And this is 2 years ago, so.
Yeah, Pete, I'm looking at the same thing. I see the numbers you're talking about, lines 16 and 17. It looks like they're saying because line 18 says if 16 or 17 is greater than or equal to 0, you're compliant.
Yeah, so it looks like we're greater than, so we're compliant. But I was wondering if those numbers meant that's how much we're over the MBR.
3.
Yeah, it doesn't say that clearly.
So it's a typical state website.
Of course it is. Follow these rules, but we're not going to tell you about them till you've already made your choices.
Right. We're going to tell you 2 years after you're not in compliance, so you're not in compliance and fine you then.
And we'll send it in a form you can't understand.
Yes.
This is similar to how they've determined per pupil expenditure, to be honest with you. The formulas that they use are state known and not so clear to others.
All right.
So Phil, does that, Steph Summers, does that show that between the two, you know, the high school and the K through 8, we're almost, you know, like whatever, 1.2 million over the MBR? Is that how you read that?
That's how I read it, Steph. And the other question I had is, once we're 1.2 million over the MBR in 1920, is that become our new MBR? I'm trying to figure out the state system. I want us to be in compliance.
I think we'll get that answer this coming November after we've made our commitments to the next forward year.
Oh, good.
Unfortunately.
Well, no, it'll be the November after that because this is 2 years out of date. We still haven't gotten the year that we're currently in.
Yeah,
So-
the one we'll get this October or November will
Will
tell,
be 2021.
right.
You're
Yes.
right.
But we have to have a budget before July because that's like when money starts getting spent. All right. I voiced my frustration. I'll shut up. Thank you.
Phil, I was going to ask a question about the high school, the number of students at EO. And would you by any chance have, I was having trouble remembering what the projections are in terms of the town's share being larger for this coming budget year and then thereafter, the next couple of years. Do you have any projections on that?
No, I mean, I from what I understand that this year is 20, the incoming year is 20 plus higher. I've heard 23. What's interesting is, and I talked to the superintendent about this, obviously this is not my budget, but I'm curious to see if we can, you know, kind of make some projections. And she's trying to figure out the same thing of how they do the math. From what I understand, it's almost 2 years, it's a year behind. But what we can't see off of our projections is move-ins. So anybody that comes into EO, so our projection for this, I think it's next year, after next year, we thought was going to drop, but it's not as clear as that, because if you have students move in, sophomores, juniors, then they get added to the list and we don't ever see that.
Right, all the students who don't go through our K through 8, we're
Correct.
not aware of, yeah.
Correct. And I mean, our enrollment projections, I mean, we are sending a bigger 8th grade class to EO. And it doesn't matter whether they go to EO or someplace else, they're still responsible for them. The following year is 19 students less per our projections. But again, that could change based upon other grades.
Christina?
I was just gonna ask Phil, but we also need to understand what the other towns' populations are doing, right? To really understand what our share is gonna be.
Well, I mean, they just divide from what I understand, and again, this is not my budget, it's not my board. From what I understand, it's divided evenly. So the groups, you know, if there's 1,000 kids at EO and Mansfield has 600, Ashford has 200, Willington has 200, and I'm leaving the others out because they're not part of the region, we pay that portion, whatever that portion is. And so that's how they come up with the tuition. So from my raw math, just really rough, was about their per pupil, I think, times the increase of the students is what I see is the increase that they have next year.
Phil, following up on Christina's question, I see what she's, I mean, I think I see what she's asking because I had the same question. Wouldn't it also be proportionate? Because if Ashford had a drop and we were even and Mansfield was even, Mansfield, us and Ashford would all pay more per pupil because you're dividing the same cost of running the school over less kids, right?
Sure.
So
Correct.
there's a comparison of the different towns and the total amount of kids going there. So if Wellington drops year after year after year, the other towns are picking up bigger and bigger shares, but we may all be paying more because there are less kids to divide the cost across.
Correct.
Okay.
And if Mansfield had a drop and we have an increase, then our proportion does change a little bit. I just remember looking at charts showing that through, the trend line for the years. And there were some years where for some reason we weren't growing or they were growing, and it never makes sense, but but it's real.
Is it possible
It is.
maybe Herb, who sits on that board, could help us understand it a little bit more? I see he's on the call, so maybe he can help, because Phil and I tried to make heads or tails of the budget that they send to us, but we're just making guesstimates based on the numbers.
Okay, hang on just a second. Pete, do you have your hand up or is that left?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
I had a couple other budgeting questions. If we have a special ed student that graduates 8th grade and is continuing in special ed, where in the budget does that show up? That's question one. And question two is, if we send somebody down to Wyndham Tech, where on the budget does that show up? Thank you.
Okay, so Herb, do you want to first take when we were talking about the proportions with Mansfield and Ashford?
Well, right now, we're in the process of working on a budget. And I did ask the superintendent regarding the percentages that Ashford's paying and Mansfield, E.O. Smith's paying, Mansfield paying, and Wellington. The enrollment for Wellington went up about 30 students, I believe. And I think the enrollment in Mansfield went up. In Ashford, it went down. The percentage is based on the number of students that each town is contributing to E.O. Smith. In our case, where we, even though we have, Mansfield had an increase of, I believe, 37 students, and we apparently are going to have about 30 students. And my question of the superintendent was, why are we paying more than of the increase than Mansfield? And the rationale is that they already have 500 students and we have 200 students. So percentage-wise, we would pay more and they would pay their share. And Ashford, where they have fewer students, would pay less. But it's based on the total number of students that each town is contributing.
Interesting.
So we're paying probably about 400,000. Mansfield is paying probably 200, and Ashford is paying a couple 100,000 less because they have fewer students.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Errico. The other two questions, Phil, from Pete Tanaka, can you answer those?
So one is special education there is, from what I understand, and Herb might be able to clarify this too, I do not believe, I'm going to break his into two parts. One is they don't view special education separately than the general budget. So it's the total cost of their budget, including all special education, and then that's divided by your percentage of your number of students. any student that legally, once they graduate, they still have services beyond their graduation. That is built into their budget as well, and we pay a portion of that as well. I do not know if that's broken down by town. I do not believe it is. But Herb, do you know if that's broken by town?
No, it's not in town.
So there's your answer, Pete. And then the second question you had was about Wyndham Tech. So similar to the K-8, when a student goes to a magnet school, we have to pay for that student out of the K-8. And so it's the same thing with E.O. Smith. When a student goes to a magnet school or any of the technical schools or someplace else, basically the money goes into E.O. Smith and they're budgeting to then pay Wyndham Tech or Cheney Tech or any of the magnet schools cover the cost of those students. Pete, I think your question really, in my opinion, should be, what are they paying?
Yeah, I guess my question was, so all high school age students come out of that Region 19 budget, regardless of whether they're going to Region 19 or not.
That is correct.
All right, that solves my issue. Thank you.
Mike,
Yes, Steph.
do you think it's worthwhile to have a Region 19 budget official talk to us about trends? Like to project, because I mean, I think we were a little caught off guard this year.
It's probably not a bad idea as a planning exercise. Hang on, I'm making a note. Okay, we can pursue that. I mean, I don't know that we can do much with this budget season.
I know, I'm just,
We can pursue that. Okay, and then I think maybe in that conversation could be questions like Mr. Erico was just saying, that the special education budget is all one and maybe isn't proportioned to the towns, and maybe that deserves looking at. If Ashford or Willington has a larger proportion of the special ed needs, maybe it is or is not fair for the taxpayers of Willington to be covering a disproportionate part of that cost, or vice versa. Maybe it works in our benefit. I don't know.
And Mike, I'll say it could, and that's the unknown, right? Because the cost of one residential outplacement, it could be $250,000. And when it's broken out by multiple towns, it helps you. When you're that one district, if it were a Willington student and you are consistently paying that $250,000, that's challenging.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Stevens while we have him here, or Mr. Erico from the Board of Ed? Okay. I'd like to, I see we have Chief Moore. Erica, go ahead.
Can I go back? So Donna and I looked like we pulled up the contract at the same time. Our contract with Bolton is for 13 in-person hours a week. And that's from the building official, or they have an assistant in Bolton. So we always have access to someone. If he's on vacation, if he's out sick, we are never without coverage. And it also includes 24-hour per day call in the duty of emergency services. So if we just did strict math by the dollars we're paying and the 13 hours a week per year, you're looking at 676 hours. That works out to be a little over $51 an hour, but that's assuming he only worked those 13 hours in a week.
Right. And I do know for sure he gets called in occasionally on emergencies. When we have fire in the middle of the night, we have called him in to determine the structural viability of the safety of a house, things like that. So, okay, thank you.
For sure. And he serves many roles in his day job in Bolton. And so we also benefit from the expertise of that. Certainly during this pandemic, he is the EMD over there and weighed in on things with us from the beginning to assist with that and keep us in the loop on things if he heard them first and sharing things. So we we get a great benefit from the town of Bolton for our building official.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was saying, I do see Chief Moore here from Willington Fire Department 1. Does anyone have any questions for the fire department? Well, we've got him. I figure maybe if anyone does or doesn't, then maybe we end up, we can release him for the night if that satisfies the board. Not hearing anything. Stephanie?
No, I was just saying hi or bye.
Oh, okay.
Hi.
Chief Moore, thank you. I think we'll get a hold of you if you have any questions, but it seems like no one has anything for you right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, other topics, areas of budget discussion, board members? Okay, I've got, let's see. I had a question. Actually, Phil, before you go, I'm just looking through notes. I did have a question that came in a casual conversation with a board member that I'll just throw out to you. That was how you look at your administrative team. I understand that you and the two principals are kind of the senior admin. Does the special ed director, does that fall into sort of your senior administration?
Yes, yes. They're basically in the same union, they're equivalent.
Okay, all right. So essentially it's 4 senior administrators.
If you include me, yes.
Yes. Okay, all right, thank you. All right, that's all I have for the school or education. Board members, do we want to keep them here in case we have more questions? Or do we feel like we're done with them tonight?
We know where to find them, right?
Yes. I just don't want to send them away if you think you're going to ask more, stuff will come up tonight.
I'm probably gonna stay anyways, Mike.
Okay.
You glutton for punishment.
Okay. I did have one question for Erica or Troy if he's here. I'm not sure if I saw. Yeah, I do. The question, as came up in the last meeting, came up in a little bit in a question to me today, and that was wrestling with this idea of not being able to get snow contractors. And what if if snow contractors were still valuable to us, what if we did, instead of putting out $1 per hour rate, which doesn't seem to have attracted the services that we need anymore, what if we were to put out an RFP and asked people to provide what they would do the work for instead, and see if we get reasonable proposals, or we get people pricing in a way that works better for them and we find we can work with as a different way of doing it, instead of just saying, we'll pay you X dollars per hour, do you like it or not like it? Some people might say, this works better for my business, and propose as something new we haven't thought of. Matt, you have a question on that?
No, I concur. I think that's a good idea.
Hi, Mike, can you hear me?
Yes, Troy, go ahead.
That's how it basically was before. Larry, our contractor now, basically when we send the bid out, he was the one that gave the price to what it was. And that's how it was worked. It was never said like a set price to be like, we're going to pay you say $200 an hour or $250 an hour or $80 an hour. They set the set price, and then that's where it went from. It wasn't like there was a whole bunch of, people bidding at it. It was just basically,
That's sent out with the needs, and then the dollar amount is, they come back with a price for what they can do that particular job for. And
Okay.
we've had the same contractors for many years. And I think that's probably where the consistent dollar figure has been coming from, right? From the same similar vendors offering the same in the same ballpark.
Okay, so that's good information. It feels to me like it's contradictory from what we've been hearing. I feel like what we've been hearing is we can't afford to pay the dollar per hour rate that attracts contractors.
Well, we haven't budgeted for it.
Hang on a second. We can't pay, I think it's been repeatedly said, we can't pay the dollar per hour rate that'll attract them. And that people also go to state contracts instead because they have a guaranteed minimum, which I understand is a different question.
Mhm.
But I guess what I want to be sure, and I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but I want to be sure we understand what really is it. What really is the issue here?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Mike. And I think we budget based on what our traditional contracted rate has been. And that sometimes can be seen as, you know, folks know how much money is there and about what the town is willing to pay. So it's a little bit of both sides, right? It's not necessarily that we can't afford to. Our budgeted amounts have been budgeted based on staying with that same rate and assuming we're going to get similar contractors in that rate. And what we found over the last couple of years is that folks don't want to bid on smaller jobs thinking that that's what we're going to choose is someone with that smaller offer, that low bid. And so that they'll go, you know, to the state where they can get more. I will tell you that, you know, we've definitely done some research in like towns around us that have similar size area and populations. Just for comparison, Ashford does not use snow contractors. They have 5 full-time staff plus their public works director and 68 miles of road. We have about 70 miles of road, and their transfer station employees are separate from those. Columbia has 40 miles of road, town road. They do not use snow contractors. They have 5 full-time public works employees plus their director. They do not do any facilities work. They have a separate facilities department. Brooklyn and Canterbury are the same. And Ashford, their 5th full-time person is a mechanic. Does labor or work, but they have a mechanic in their shop. So, you know, what we're seeing is towns our size have, you know, larger crews and they're not using snow contractors. They're doing it all in-house. So, you know, we believe that we have about the same kind of work, and this shows that we're not so far off in what we're asking for and the need. So just for comparison's sake, for your information.
Thank you.
Oh, and Ashford bought an excavator in 2009 and says it's the best thing that they ever bought. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Maybe
So,
we can rent it for a few hours like we do with our building official from Bolton.
right. You never know. So.
Okay, other board questions, maybe since we're on Public Works at the moment? Other board members, questions, concerns? Okay, any other topics for board members of discussion? I will point out that we cannot make appropriations or allocations tonight. Tonight is a discussion night. We can take that discussion anywhere that's on topic. And then according to our board, the schedule that we've released to the public, the agenda for next week will be the actual appropriations, where we'll make the final decisions on how to fund each budget, each department, if you will, like we did last year. We'll essentially do our roll call through. So I'm opening it up to people. The only other, I'm looking through all my notes, and the only other topic that's brought up with any concern is the significant increase in the library. Anybody else on that one? Are we done with budget discussion for tonight?
Mike,
Yes.
on the library, I think that that is a rather substantial rise in the request. That we should be looking at that carefully. Also, next week when we come to these appropriations, if people would have numbers in mind that where they like to see things as well as where they've been proposed. That would be nice.
People, you mean board members?
Yes, that's exactly who I mean. Thank you.
Yes.
Is the library increase around 12%? I'm just trying to.
It's
The
49.
library grant is 48.2%. It's $91,800.
Yeah,
According to page 2 of the preliminary expenditure budget. Now, I didn't look at revenue for that comment I just made. That's the expense increase. So I'm assuming that's after any revenue that they're applying internally into their budget. Matt, go ahead.
yeah, I concur with Peter. I think that 49 or 45% increase is very, very, very large. So,
Yes, I'm in agreement with that also.
Okay, so we need to be prepared, as Pete said, people of the board need to be prepared for next week. We can certainly discuss it more here. I'm not trying to stop the discussion. I'm just saying next week when we make appropriations, we need to be prepared to propose what we want to see in that area and make a decision on what we're funding. And certainly feel free to continue talking about it now. I'm just looking over the rest of the budgets. Just a reminder as I'm reviewing this, based on the information provided by our treasurer at the last meeting, all of the budgets currently submitted, if they were approved as they are, and if we plug some assumptions into our budget formula of things like $400,000 from the general fund, would put us at a 1.9 mil increase. We have, as we always do, we have options on how those numbers move around. We can raise and lower what we apply from the fund balance. We can raise and lower what we approve for allocations or appropriations to each department. And we even, I think this past, in the current fiscal year, I think we even lowered our expectations slightly on the collection rate for taxes to build in a little buffer in the budget. So all of those things are on the table. Reducing expenses, or moving expenses up and down, moving revenue up and down through tax collection rates, and moving transfers up and down from capital. I mean, not capital, fund balance. Pete Tanaka, I see your hand up, or are you clapping?
No, I'm waving. I can't figure out how to use my buttons.
Okay, please go ahead, Pete.
I'm sorry, I'm a little slow tonight. I just had my COVID shot and it's starting to whack me. Mr. Stevens, looking at some of the federal money, it looked like there was a lot of money coming in for school air handling equipment and that kind of thing. I noticed that in our budget, there's like air conditioners and air handling units and some of that stuff. Is there any chance that that's gonna be coming from federal money?
I'm not sure what's in there for air conditioning.
Oh, in our budget?
Oh, in CIP, you mean?
Yeah, in CIP.
Oh, so this is the same thing that Erica said tonight, is that we don't have the details yet for any of we have general ideas, but we don't know the exact totals or what the parameters are going to be yet. We did offset our budget already over $100,000 from the ESSER 2 funds. I think they're coming. It's about 268. It has to be connected to COVID related items. And that's why we offset the budget with the items that were COVID related. A big chunk of that was the utility staff that we have, and that was about 100,000 if I remember correctly. And I have not seen anything as far as yet about the requirements of the federal funds that are supposed to be coming.
I don't think anybody has. I'm just
Yeah.
wondering how to, once again, like the MBR, we're budgeting blind with some of this stuff, and I'm hoping that we either get refunded or they pay for it, or, you know, something like that, if we got money are coming our way.
Yeah, and I said to the board, Pete, you know, I was willing to take some of the risk with offsetting this budget for, you know, using the ESSER 2 funds, because it was announced, we can see, you know, a specific dollar amount. They followed through the CRF funds. As far as beyond the ESSER 2 funds, I'm interested to see where it goes. But the coronavirus relief funds that came in, we had to, and Donna and I were just looking at this today. They have to go in very specific columns, and they were looking for very specific percentages with priority around health and safety. I don't know how they're going to balance that. What we have heard from the ESSER 2 funds is that it's supposed to be used around items that are connected to, they're learning about, worried about learning loss. And that's supposed to be one of the priorities, along now with health and safety, masks, things like that.
Okay.
Peter, just so you know, I've had multiple meetings over the last couple of days that give us a lot of information, but zero detail. Because the bill wasn't signed, Treasury doesn't have all those things worked out, and they have 60 days to get the money out. So with the last coronavirus funds, they took about a month to get the detail on spending out. I don't know if they'll take about that time, but it could be about a month before we know how these dollars could be spent. Because if we thought we could spend it on some things within this budget, you know, and take them out and not push them farther to taxpayers, we would, but it's kind of risky if they're things that we need and we really don't know what kind of reporting or details we'll need. And we also believe we're going to get the funds. We're not sure, we're still not sure if they're going to come directly to us. The state is supposed to in 30 days turn them over to us, not hold them like they did the CRF. But nothing is clear. So as soon as we know information, we'll pass that along.
The thing was signed today, correct?
It was signed
The
today.
president signed it today.
Yeah, so the vote was yesterday. It was passed yesterday. So we knew
Is there
yesterday.
any
that these
chance that
things
we'll
were
know
a
anything
go.
by next week?
I'm sorry?
Is there any chance that we'll know anything by next week? I'm guessing
Peter, I
no.
would love to say yes, but the answer that we've gotten from our reps out of DC for Connecticut are just that I doubt it. They don't really know. They want to move quickly, and you can see things moving very quickly. But the last time it took a month for Treasury to get these things out, and this is all coming through Treasury. So I would love for it to be before we get to the point where taxpayers are paying for things that we could, you know, take out of here. I did mention that I think the cameras can and should be paid with these funds. Right now it's in LoCIP dollars, so it's off budget. So we wouldn't be taxing based on that. So that's one project I feel pretty confident saying that, you know, I think we could get, and it would not, then that would leave us with LoCIP funds for projects in future years.
Okay, any
I-
other?
Oh,
Yeah.
I just wondered, do you want to share the 10-year mill rate comparison?
I was actually just about to do that.
Okay,
I'm gonna do a screen share. Stephanie did some research on mill rates, and the document speaks for itself. And if you give me a second, I'm going to attempt. Let's see.
I mean, while Mike's doing that, one of the things that I noticed on it is Union went down to like almost 2 points in their mill rate from 2020 to 2021. I don't know if it's related to the fact that we sort of helped them out with fire coverage or emergency services, but I thought that was noteworthy, and I'm not really sure what the reason is. So they are the lowest mill rate, but we're, you know, one notch up from them. So everyone else in the regional towns were well below.
Can people see this? My screen share? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Nice nodding heads, so that's a good sign. Okay, so this is the comparison that Stephanie put together of the mill rates. For board members, I will email it to you right after the meeting.
I did email it to people, but not their private emails, and I don't have Brenda's
Okay.
yet. It didn't pop up.
Okay.
So it's on your town email.
I will send it to the regular contact list for Board of Finance to make sure everyone.
Great. That would be great. Thanks.
Okay, so there is that's the document Stephanie's talking about. It is funny because that thought crossed my mind also, Stephanie, is with a budget as small as Union's, that thing about the ambulance did cross my mind.
I bet I can answer that
It could
for
have
you.
made a lot of difference, in there.
Bill?
Union Schools had a part-time superintendent and a principal. They are now have a split position that is one person. Acts as the superintendent and principal. There's funds there.
That would probably do it almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mike, can I just make a comment about the ambulance real quick?
Yes, absolutely.
They've never had an ambulance, so there would be no change in the cost for them. So
Yeah,
as far as emergency
I-
services, for us, there's no change for that.
Yes, I understand that, but if the idea is that,
They're not paying for it.
right, if we end up coming up with some sort of an agreement where they share some of the costs that the Wellington taxpayers are bearing, that might change the number a little bit, but I think Phil's answer is more likely their current situation. That would affect it in the future, Alex, not what they've already done. You're right about whether they've already been, because they haven't been paying for it.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions while this is on the screen from board members? All right, I'm gonna get rid of that. I will email it right after the meeting. Okay, more discussion? Or are we ready to get to next week to allocations? All right, well, getting out at a reasonable hour isn't going to break my heart. Let's move on to correspondence. You have everything except the sheet we just looked at, and I'll send it to you right after. So we're back to present to speak. So as we always do, if you are on video right now and you'd like to speak, wave your hand. I only see pretty much board members and Donna. If you are not using a video camera, oh, I see Peter, are you? Yep, go ahead, Peter Latinchit.
I believe I'm unmuted. Good evening, Peter Latinchich, 97 Trask Road. I was curious to see how the conversation would go tonight, because this was your discussion evening and it seemed relatively quiet. And as a member of the public, that was somewhat surprising to me. Last meeting was kind of a difficult evening with the treasurer's report indicating that our mill rate, our grand list is essentially flat and our revenues have decreased. It somewhat confirms to me the original assessment that was made by your board in the first meeting of the budget process, where you looked at the Yukon report from Professor Carstensen showing that we're in a deep economic recession. I would ask the board prior to the next meeting to reflect on, given those circumstances, presenting the town at this point with a $2 million increase. That would be a sizable increase for our town in normal or good economic years. This is certainly not that. So I would ask that you particularly look at the expense side of the budget and not be distracted by revenues or mill rate calculations, which is tempting often to do. I think you have to consider that increasing spending at a time when so many people have lost their jobs or their businesses, or both, or suffering just severe economic distress makes any kind of increase wrong. And I do believe that you have to consider that very carefully at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Other present to speak? If you are not using video and you'd like to unmute and call out your name, we'll call you. Okay, seeing none. Moving on to good and welfare. Good coming, chances to get outside are improving. Vaccinations are improving the public health situation. So everybody be healthy, be safe. And Peter, I guess we're ready for you.
Move to adjourn.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor of adjournment, please wave, say aye.
Aye.
Hey, Pete, before we go, did you get your first or your second?
Second.
I got my second yesterday.
Yeah, the second's much worse than the first. The first didn't do anything to me. The second one.
That's what they're saying.
Yeah,
Although
not-
All right,
I'm
we
fine
are
so far.
we are adjourned. Good night.
This is not real business anyway.